Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint a Stargazer lily. So grab your paints and let's get started. Right then, so we're going to paint a Stargazer lily and that flower is really quite large. It's going to really dominate the piece. So I'm going to begin by drawing a stem, but the flower is going to be here. So I'm going to draw a circle, which is going to anchor all our petals. And for the moment, I'm just going to paint the flower because I need to see how massive it's going to go before we decide where we're going to put everything else. I've got in my brush kit today my large round size 12 brush, which is much larger than even my largest regular brushes. And that's because I'm going to use it to create the petals of the Stargazer lily. Move my pencil away. This brush is available in my shop, so if you are interested in how it all works today, then be sure to have a little look at that. So I'm just waking up the permanent rose in my palette and I'm getting a very dilute bit of colour there. I've also got Alizarin Crimson mixed up here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in 3 petals in a sort of star shape. So actually what I will do with my pencil, just so we can help ourselves out, I'm going to do that so we can see the direction of the petals. And the idea is that I can do it with this brush and do it in as few brush strokes as possible. Now at the moment that is very, very dilute, and that's kind of what we want, because now what I'm going to do, the smaller brush, a size 0, so I'm just going to send some Alizarin Crimson up the middle. Okay, so we'll do that again. It's quite a warm day today, so the petals are going to dry quite fast. So up the middle. Whee. I'm always really keen to show you how to create lovely flowers and things in actually quite a simple method. So there we go. I quite like it if it's a little curl, little sort of bend in a certain direction with the petal. That's looking really nice. We're going to let that dry 100% and then we're going to paint in 3 more. So we let those 3 petals dry 100% and I'm now just putting in the last of the 3 new petals just in the gaps. And if I do say myself, I think that looks rather wonderful. Now we're going to let that dry and you can see those first 3 petals, the beautiful crisp edges that comes from painting a very dilute flower. So now we have that marked in, I can see whereabouts I want to put in leaves or maybe a sort of budding flower. So I'm going to place in a bud there and we'll have a leaf sort of coming off there, and maybe I've got a bud there, we could have another one coming there and a leaf coming off there. That's quite nice. Yeah, I like that. Keep it simple. So in terms of the leaves and the buds, well, the green is going to creep in now. So we've got some Sap Green here, just waking that up, and we're also going to include a bit of yellow into the green, which can either be done with your green gold if you've got that in your palette. It's one of my favourite colours to have. It's one of the less common ones. Or of course you can have cadmium yellow as well. So we'll just mix those up and get rid of that little hair that's in my palette. And I'm going to begin with these buds up here. Now, the ones that have sort of been really quite fresh and new are going to have more green in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my size 8 brush and I'm going to create a sort of elongated shape, and you see I just added in little bits of unpainted space there to create some sort of ridges. But I'm also going to take some sap green and just place that in the base and in the top, and that's got a lovely bud for us. Whereas the one further down here is going to be just a little bit closer to opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a slightly more dilute colour here, and I'm also going to take a bit of permanent rose, and I'm going to begin by painting in the shape in very dilute permanent rose, and you'd see I've just not quite closed it off at the top there, and then a bit of the dilute green just to allow this to blend in. Don't mess about with it too much. We'll just take a tiny bit of green, tiny bit at the top there. And that's going to be much paler in general as well, because really the colour of the petals is coming through much more strongly. However, just with a much smaller brush for both of them now, I'm going to take a bit more sap green and just place a little bit in there. So another little wait to get everything dry, and then on to the next stage. I'm now going to begin painting in the stem. I've got a size 0 brush here. Quite often these days I've started using the rigger brush for stems, but this is quite a thick stem, so I'd prefer to have something with just a bit more, well, I don't need the long slender bristles quite so much. I'm using my sap green mixed with green gold, and I'm just carefully painting around the edge of the flower, and of course it's very important this flower is dry before I begin attempting this. That stem that we drew in the beginning, if there are places like this with a pencil where we want the pencil to disappear at the end, well, the first thing is very important, is making sure when you do draw that pencil in the beginning, you draw it nice and faint, and you could even rub it out to the point where it's only just a little bit visible, and then that just makes your life a lot easier when you come to attempt rubbing it out right at the end. So the stem is going to get a bit thicker towards the bottom, and I'm going to add in just a bit more sap green. I mean, like I say, it's a warm day, so these things are going to dry quite fast, but there still is some scope to get the green there. And what we'll be doing is be adding in a bit of shadow later on. But now it's time for some leaves. Now the leaves of a lily, Stargazer lily, are quite dark, deep green, so we can get our sap green a bit more concentrated. Also, if you want, some people's sap greens aren't quite as bluey green as mine anyway, so you could add a bit of blue to your mix. This is French ultramarine blue. It's a blue I love to mix with my greens, so you could always add in some of that. Now I've got a size 8 brush here, and I am going to, I'll paint in one here. So I did do a little pencil line, fluff on my brush, so I can follow that line with a little tapered line there, and a bit more colour. And I'm just quite interested in getting some really, really delicate fine lines there we go. And if you want, you could always take a bit of that blue and just drop it in either end. I've got another leaf up here which is going to be more sort of from the side, so we're not going to see quite as much of the thickness, but I could just add in a little bit of a thickener And you can do all that with these larger brushes. That's the beauty of it. Get those really fine points if you want. Okay, another little bit of drying time for those, but in the meantime we can have a look at the centre of our flower. Now I have on purpose painted quite dilute, even the stronger colours, because there is quite a lot of interest in the middle of a Stargazer lily. We're going to begin by mixing up this. I always have this ready mix in my palette of yellow and cadmium yellow, sap green, which just creates a really lovely sort of zesty lime green, I suppose. Also, word to the wise, don't mix your colours in a tiny brush. I'm being very silly right now. Mix them up in a larger brush. That's much better. And we're going to paint in some sepals. So you could get your pencil in one more time. So those little lines that we drew are going to be very useful, but also we want to sort of get a line for our main filament. So I'm going to have a line going out that way, and then we've got other filaments coming out as well. All will make sense once I actually start painting them in. Now if you wanted to really thicken your paint, you could use a bit of either white watercolour as a thickener or acrylic. So I think I'm going to add a little bit of that in and then get painting. So by adding in some of that thick white acrylic to this paint, I've now got a wonderfully sort of concentrated but light colour, and I'm just using my rigger brush to paint it in. You could use gouache as well. That's another sort of thick, slightly thicker paint that is more like an opaque watercolour. And what I'm just doing is adding in little filaments. And I will also, I just added a bit to my green gold mix as well. I want to paint in some little sepals. And they'll look a little bit sort of muddy, but that's okay. Lovely. And then on the ends of these filaments we're going to add the sort of rather iconic pollen, which I'm going to use Cadmium Orange to do, and just sort of place that in. Cadmium Orange is quite a concentrated colour anyway, so I'm adding it in with as few brush strokes as possible, and that just means it goes on really, really nicely. And then at the end of the central filament we get a really sort of dark colour, so I'm going to get a bit of shadow. My burnt sienna, Paynes Grey, mix it in with a little bit of sap green, and just sort of dab a few dots there. Okay, so things are looking really nice. We just have a few more stages left to go. We're going to add a bit more sort of colour and interest to our petals, but we do need to wait for these layers to dry up. So I'm getting some shadow mixed up, and we're going to place in a little bit of that shadow onto the plant. So burnt sienna, Paynes Grey makes these lovely grey tones, but I'm going to also add in some green, some sap green, and just get it nice and fresh. And just to be careful not to stick my hand in that, I'm going to find little areas where these bits of shadow And you might get a line coming up there. Even up this one. It just helps sort of create the piece, gives it a little bit more interaction between the stem and the plant. And then I'm just going to take a tiny bit more of the just pure Paynes Grey. And add a bit more. Okay, we're going to let this all dry and then finish off details on the flower. So the final stages are a little bit fiddly, so I thought I'd do a few examples first on these two, and then you can see what I'm talking about. So I've got my Alizarin Crimson, and what I'm going to do is I want to paint 2 parallel lines like that, and then I am just blending outwards from them both. Kind of up to you what size brush you use for this bit, because while you want to have sort of getting the bleed and blend out quite far into the petal quite fast, you also want to have control so that you're not sort of getting too blended up with the other things. So I've got a size 2/10, and then what I'm going to do is place in some dots, and some will bleed in and others won't quite yet, and that's we're basically laying down the basis for the texture on these petals. And then for the petals underneath, we've just got to remember that we can't see all the way into them. Clean off that brush, blend it out to the sides. I think this is why I've not taught the Stargazer lily before, because it's taken me a while to sort of decide the best way to teach it, because it is a little bit fiddly at this stage. Okay, so a bit more Alizarin Crimson, getting those dots into the wet colour. Really pleased with that, that's looking lovely. Okay, so we'll get all those done, and then, oops, just drop some water on it, and then we will get the last bits of detail in. This last bit is my favourite bit. It's when we tidy everything up and get some lovely detail in there. So I'm using my sort of darker, stronger greens to begin adding little bits of detail, little bits of darkness. Actually, no, I'll keep on with the rigger brush. So adding a little line of the darker green just to the edge of my filaments, and that's why we start with the lighter colour first, because then we can always add to it with a little bit of this, and we're just looking for places where we can tidy up. So the sepals underneath here, they can be just sort of edged a little bit. So I've now got my 4/10 brush, and I'm just looking for the gaps. Then I'm going to get a bit of the Cadmium Orange, and to just darken that down a bit I'm just going to add in a little bit of Cadmium Red, and there I can just help bring out the shapes. And then on the petals themselves we also have more concentrated flecks of Alizarin Crimson. So they're dots, but they're sort of dashes. They're angling out a little bit from that central channel. So I'm just going to add in those, and then we will be done. Finish off your Stargazer lily. I've just got my rigger brush and I'm adding in a few leaf lines which just help the sense of the details on these leaves. I'm always looking for nice sort of quick and simple ways to create detail. That's the new botanical painting style, which I do, and that is the name of my first book, which is where you'll find all sorts of lovely flowers in this style. And yeah, this is exactly how we paint. So if you enjoyed this and want more, you can get yourself a copy of the book, and you can get a signed copy from me in my shop. But for now, thank you for watching. There is your Stargazer lily. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on. And if you're sharing your work on social media, don't forget to tag us at the Winton Paper Co on Instagram so we can celebrate your wonderful paintings. And if you want to subscribe, then hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell, and you'll never miss another video. Until next time, bye!